Thanks very much, Andy. As many of you may know, I've actually left Autonomy now, so I'm very pleased to have something to do rather than hang around shopping centres looking menacing and that kind of thing. The one big advantage of this, though, is that I don't have a corporate PR department that is about to have kittens when I go off-piste. So what I thought I'd do is use this rare moment in a career to actually tell you what's really going on with cloud and give you some of the things to think about who are going to be the winners and losers. So I'm hoping that I'm just going to give you 10 ideas, and then people by all means can debate them and decide that I'm completely wrong, but at least it will give us something more interesting to talk about than the usual hype that we get all the time in cloud. So what you've got in cloud at the moment is every corporate PR department for every IT vendor cannot put out cloud releases fast enough. CIOs are being told that they are so yesterday if they haven't completely ripped up everything they've done for the last 30 years and moved it instantaneously to the cloud. And of course, VC money has been piling in like there's no tomorrow. So what do I know about the cloud? Well, Autonomy had a very sort of strange situation of actually working in the cloud before it was the cloud, so before even the phrase was coined. For various reasons, just to do with practicality, we were dealing with a lot of our customer information in a cloud. And in fact, Autonomy runs the world's largest private heterogeneous cloud, which is a fact that not many people know, which is currently around 50 petabytes and is growing at a phenomenal rate. And so what we've seen is the practical reality of what's going on and what people are doing. And I hope that some of that will give you some things to think about. So I've come up with sort of 10 ideas to think about from the cloud. Obviously, in potting them as ideas, they're generalizations, but I think they're quite useful ones. So let's launch in. Well, the first one is existing systems will not move. Everyone seems to have forgotten the old IT rule, which is if it's working, don't mess with it. And CIOs have grown up with this all the time. No one really gives you that much credit for taking on a great thing, moving something that's working. There's a little bit of disruption and it breaks. So the first simple idea here is, now obviously there's a time scale, obviously eventually stuff moves. But remember, there are a lot of mainframes in the world still running a lot of COBOL applications because no one ever wanted to move them. So number one is existing systems will not move. Now what that means if you're a venture capitalist is be very careful about investing in a company which is producing the cloud analogy of a traditional legacy app, because everyone's bought the app and they're not going to move it. So it may be great having the world's greatest cloud-based ERP, but you have to be very realistic about how quickly customers are going to turn over on that one. Next one's quite an interesting one, which is security. Now, we've got Steve, who's an expert, so I'm going to be careful to leave it to him. And everyone talks about security in the cloud. And it is probably the biggest first question that you get when someone raises the idea of moving to the cloud. So from a point of view of a PR issue, it's massive. And it's only going to get more massive because we will have some disasters. We will have data that's in someone's cloud getting out. It will be all over the papers. There will be a reaction to it. But the actual reality is this bridge has been crossed a long time ago. So, for example, Autonomy in its cloud has probably the most sensitive commercial information in the world, which is pretty much every message on Wall Street. Every deal, every bid, every company takeover, all of that flows through the cloud and is stored in the cloud now, and it has been for some time. And what that tells you is when there's actually an imperative to move to the cloud, and people really have to think about security, you can get to a point where people are comfortable with that. Now, having said that, in order to have built that reputation, we have to do things like drug test our employees. Luckily, it didn't apply to senior employees, only junior ones. But, and you have to build trust over time. So one of the other interesting effects you're going to get around security is trust. So the companies that can build trust with the clients to have the information held will do very well. As soon as you get one of these crises, we'll all go backwards 2 steps and then move forward. So trust is going to be important, but actually I think security, it can always be better and there'll always be problems, but actually when it comes down to really doing it, is not actually as much of an issue. The next one is bag of bolts. So what you've got is the industry, everyone that's in the industry, whether you make servers or hard disks or bits of software or whatever, suddenly decides they have to jump on the cloud bandwagon. And what you've tended to see from the very large companies is that they've got all these bits, and what they do is they suddenly pronounce they have a cloud strategy, and they produce a bag of bolts, and there'll be a diagram that shows that they have servers here and network here and outsourced services for data centers here and virtualization software they buy from someone else here. I think one of the interesting things is when we think about who's doing the buying, and Andy kind of alluded to this, a bag of bolts, which is the old traditional IT model, really is not very powerful at all. People are much more interested in buying something that's a car than a kit of parts from which you can make a car. And in fact, that's the whole point of the cloud. So what you should do is look down people's cloud strategies and offering and saying, well, am I being sold a bag of bolts here? Because if you are, then I would question the viability of that model. Number 4, and again, Andy kind of headed me on this one, but the most important change, I think, in the cloud is who is the buyer. Who is the buyer? Who's got the power to do the buying, and how are they buying? And traditionally, most of our industry was set up to go and talk to IT people, and we'd sell stuff to IT people, and they'd have fun trying to plug it all together, and the process would repeat. But what's happening now is that the thing that's driving the cloud, where it really is taking off, is the ability of non-IT to do something. So let's take the example of someone in marketing. Someone in marketing wants to add optimization to the corporate website. They know they need to do this. It's the new approach to marketing. It's great. They can go and talk to their IT department. The IT department will initially say no, because that's the response to every change that is requested within their company. When eventually the IT department agrees to do it, it will load in all of the internal costs. So it will be very expensive. It will take a long time to appear, and whenever marketing want to make a change, it will go through this whole process again. Or they can go online to one of the cloud-based marketing optimization companies, which is a new function, it's not a legacy one. They can enter their credit card, and they can have the thing up and running by next Friday. The power has just shifted all the way away from IT to the business units, and that's what's actually driving, I think, the cloud in its biggest model. And that means that the IT world and vendors need to talk to those people in a different way. Coming back to procurement, the whole model of procurement changes. Procurement is being done off credit cards. It's actually a massive corporate compliance issue because you can't control it. So that takes me to my next point, which is something that people in the industry don't talk about, which is the unofficial cloud. If you are in a regulated industry like financial services or pharma, what's actually happening is that your IT systems are so unhelpful that your staff now are just getting out their credit card and going to the unregulated cloud. So they're using Dropbox or even installing apps on Amazon. CIO, it's a nightmare, because how do you find this? Chief Compliance Officer, it's a nightmare. The reality you need to accept is your staff are doing this because it's more flexible and easy for them to use the unofficial cloud than work through the systems that you have. And I'm not sure what the answer is to that one, but it's a definite effect that you've got going on. Now, I don't know anything about chips and semiconductors and all that kind of stuff, but that won't stop me. So let's talk about what it's doing to chips. Well, the one thing I do know about data centers, because Autonomy has to run big ones for this cloud, is heat. Heat density is what people are always talking to me about. So cool chips and cool architectures seem to be really, really important. So I'd be looking at things that are about taking a very different approach to producing that compute power that is cool. What about servers? Well, I think there's going to be a big change here, because Sean's absolutely right. We software people, we want more power. We can do things with voice and video and all sorts of stuff, so we want compute power. But actually, the way in which that's packaged is a major threat to the current server players. Because what we've been doing in the past is buying powerful servers. But if you look at people that are buying cloud infrastructure, so the Facebooks and the Zingers and the LinkedIns and the Amazons, the model now is a lot of very cheap servers. And that, again, is a big change in the model. So, you know, how it gets responded. The other thing is the buying power of those people is phenomenal. If you're a server manufacturer and Facebook turn up to you and they want to give you an order for very large number of servers, and they do that to your competitor, they are in an incredible price-setting position, which means that the margins in that business are getting slammed because you now have a small number of big buyers that are in an incredible position to negotiate because you can't afford not to win that order. A similar interesting one is services. So if we take the old IT model, some big company or government department would call in a services partner. The services partner would do a study about what the system needed to do. It would be very complicated, big document be produced. They would then go away and write this. Halfway through, because it would take 2 years, all of the requirements would change. Then they'd make a load of money on change orders, and another 2 years it would go on, and the process would carry on pretty much ad infinitum, actually. And it was good business, and there was lots of margin, lots of people kept employed. Now, what we're going to see in services is initially there's going to be good business in helping people do things with the cloud. But actually the model is so different. So rather than going into the client and taking a standard solution which does 95% of what the client does and convincing them they need the custom extra 5% and making it really complicated and then doing change order because the timescale, you've basically got a situation where for very little effort and much less cost, you can get 95% of the functionality that you need pretty much up on day one, perhaps even with a credit card. Well, in that situation, people are really going to question whether they need the other 5%. And that means you've got a standard model. And if you've got a standard model and everyone accepts the standard model, so we're not going to ask for the buttons to be blue, we're happy for them to be green, then that's a major question mark over the old services model. Can you actually make margin, which is where you used to make it on things like the change orders? So we need to think about services very different. The other thing is the agility. So we're going to talk about the pace of innovation in a moment. Next one, number 8, is devices and mobile and bring your own device. The data is moving. If the data goes to the cloud, then it's accessible for all your devices, for bringing your own device, and the whole device landscape changes because the data is now central. And we're seeing this both in consumer and in enterprise, and that's really interesting. Number 9 is the pace of innovation. If I write a software program and I then have to ship that around the world to 20,000 customers, I need to be pretty sure it's all going to work. Because someone in Jakarta has a problem that's got to get fixed, so there's a long cycle of Q&A. If I'm doing it in the cloud, I can fix it instantaneously as soon as I see a problem. And moreover, I've got the same version for everyone. Therefore, you get a situation where, because you're not customizing the system, you're much less likely to be introducing problems and bugs. And what that means is that the whole cycle time and agility is going to pick up very rapidly. And what that also means is that you've got an amortization of development costs for a new function across all of those clients, which again is a big advantage over the traditional customized services model. So we're going to see a pace of innovation effect. Now, last one, number 10, is probably the most important one. Margin. The cloud is going to be big. It's going to affect everything. But is there any margin in it? At the moment, a number of times I've sat around tables, especially with large IT providers, and there's a land grab argument. We'll put in the bid for this data center and we'll do it at below cost because somehow in future, once we've got the customer, we'll make money. And so what you're going to see is a lot of zero or negative margin business written. And also you've got the ability to play off standard compute against sources that drives the price down, rather like we were talking about with the standard server. So margin is really the question. And obviously I'm very interested in looking around at where you can see margin in cloud. One of the ones coming from the software world I'm very interested in is owning the data. Once you have the data in a private cloud, your ability to put different services on that data allows you to create margin because you can directly link that to business benefit. So this is very different to selling a server. It's about selling the solution. So an example here would be Autonomy, with its 50 petabytes, had pretty much every piece of email and messaging within a company. You could then do all sorts of interesting things. Salesforce.com, very much of this model, they started with sort of sales automation and CRM and then moving out. And of course the idea there is that even other software companies that want to write products for that data have to go through that platform. We're seeing this on the consumer side. What is Facebook? Facebook is something which is getting all of the consumer's data and then the ability to monetize that data, because it's not going to move, because it's too complex and it's too interconnected and it's too large. So once the data resides there, Apple's trying it with iCloud. So I would actually say that the most interesting areas in the cloud are the ones that are higher up the stack, where the data becomes the asset which can't be moved, and therefore is the asset which allows margin to be extracted. So anyway, those are my 10 thoughts. You may disagree with them. You may have other ideas, but at least they're things to start thinking about the changes that are going on. Just to conclude, standing up here in front of something that says Great Britain, one should really comment on Great Britain and the cloud. I think it's very interesting that we in the UK have got some very fundamental little bits of technology which I think have affected the cloud. I hope Sean won't mind me mentioning ARM again. ARM's a company that's gone on a phenomenal curve on the device side in terms of a different model, and that's paid off on devices. Now we have a new concept, which is, can we get low power compute by using different architectures on the server side of the data center, and that opens up a whole new game there. I don't know who the winners will be, but it's certainly an opportunity. Companies like Autonomy and understanding the meaning of the information, that's technology that comes out of the UK and is used by almost every major software company now in their products to understand the meaning. And then technologies like the Internet of Things, some of the bright new companies like Newell out of Cambridge, where millions and millions of devices, everything from your fridge to your toaster, is going to be connected to the internet, and that information is all going to go through central clouds. So one of the interesting things is in the UK, we have great fundamental technology, which I think can play into the reality of what the cloud is going to be. Thank you very much.